Okay, this is a video not to show off, so don't expect to see anything fancy. Um, I'm a rudimentary guitarist in my own opinion. I've been playing for, let's see, 45 years? Yeah, okay. But I haven't really worked hard at it that whole time. I've played in bands and whatnot, and I got a degree in music, but not on guitar. But over that time, I've picked up on some thoughts, and that's what I want to try and pass on to anybody that watches this, just to help you maybe get past some hurdles or accelerate your learning a little bit. One thing I'm sure you've heard a million times, and I'm just going to reiterate it, the more you play, the better you get. And that's really what it boils down to. And there are going to be things that are difficult to play when you first try them, but if you just keep at them, just keep plugging at them, don't push, just keep working, they become easier. They really do. It becomes second nature to you just over time. The more you do it, the faster it happens. Okay, so keep that in mind. But with that in mind, I also want to point out a few things that you may not be aware of, or that you may not have thought of, or that aren't necessarily intuitive. Let's just start with music in general. Okay, popular music is going to be my main focus in this, but this applies to just about anything. The Western music system, which is what most of you are working within, is comprised of 12 tones. That's it. 12. No more. They repeat higher octaves or lower octaves, but those 12 tones are still the same 12 tones. And of those 12, we normally only use, at any given time, 8 of them. Exception to that rule would be if you do what they call modulating, where you switch from one key to another key at some point in the song, and then you add a couple tones, because there'll be different tones in the different key. But for the most part, one key, 8 tones, that's all you're going to use. Of those 8 tones, you're going to be using chords, most likely. There's only a few songs which I have found that only use one chord or no chord. And of those chords, you're going to usually use 3 to 4, sometimes more. But most popular music, 3 or 4 chords, starting on the same steps in the scale. That's why when you learn one song, you've learned a ton of them. It's just a matter of what's the melody that goes with it, what's the rhythm that goes with it, what's the feel, what's the sound of the singer, whatever. Bands I've played in, we've done medleys, just based off of your what we call a 1-4-5, and to make that easier for you. If you're in the key of C, 1 is going to be the first degree of the scale, C. 4 is going to be the 4th step, F, and 5 is going to be the 5th step, G. Chords C, F, and G. Boom, there you go. 1-4-5 in the key of C. That applies to any scale, any key, whatever. So don't get overwhelmed by things. For the most part, you're not dealing with that many tones. Likewise, don't get all wound up about plagiarism, because I'm sorry, with only 12 tones, and of those only 8 usually used, over thousands of years, you're going to have songs that sound the same. I'm sorry. It's going to happen. I mean, there are blatant, examples of either direct plagiarism, let's say Surfing USA, and cases of people accidentally plagiarizing, like My Sweet Lord. But then there are ones where, I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous. Say Huey Lewis suing Ray Parker Jr. over Ghostbusters. It's pathetic. So don't get all wound up about that stuff. Just learn what you can. You're gonna make songs that sound like somebody else's, whether you try, whether you're trying or not. So okay, minimal number of notes to work with. When you're learning guitar at first, you're going to be learning some basic, what they call root chords, which means you're using a lot of open strings. Chords, generally speaking, are comprised of 3 tones or 4, sometimes more, but those get a little fancy, and you're adding things for color. Okay, make them a little bit more interesting. But for the most part, 3 tones, and with heavy-duty rock and roll, you're often using what they call power chords, which boils down to 2 tones. It's not really a chord, it's what's called an interval. And because of that, it's not even, they sometimes notate it as like a 5 chord. Like you'll see F5 or G5 or C5, and what they're saying is you're just playing the root tone of the chord, like if it's a C, C, and then a tone 5 steps above that, a G. So, that would be your basic F, like a 5 chord. F5 would be G5, A5, just power chords. You use a lot of those in rock and roll. So when you're learning these chords, one thing is don't get locked into the idea that a chord has to be played one specific way, because that's not true. Not only can it be played in different points on the neck, and each one having its own particular color or timbre to it, but also you can use different fingers. Let's just take a very basic chord that everybody learns at the beginning for the most part, which is called a G. Okay, now a G is this tone here, 5th string, 2nd fret, this tone here, 6th string, 3rd fret, this tone here, 1st string, 3rd fret. Okay, now when you're first teaching it, often they'll teach it to you using your index finger, middle finger, and 3rd finger. Okay, that's fine, that works. But you can also play it with the other 3 fingers. Or you can play it by just deadening the 5th string, play those. Or you can lay a finger across the first 2 strings and touch that one. Do that. Or put the finger back here. There's a number of different ways to play it, all in basically the same formation. Just depending on what you want to do next. Where are you going to go from there? If the next chord you're going to do involves putting a finger down here, well then this is good. If the next thing you're going to do involves adding a note up here with your little finger, then this is a good one. It's a matter of where are you going to go from that point. All of that's not as important as just the concept. Don't get locked into one formation. Play your A this way, or this way, or this way. It doesn't matter which fingers you're using. All that matters is that you know where it's at. Start with one, learn it. Once you figure you've learned a chord with one fingering, try a different one. Get lost for a while. That's the way you expand your knowledge. Don't get locked in the idea that you have to have your thumb in one particular place. Yeah, okay, having a thumb around the back of the neck is pretty common, but nothing says it has to be there. You can put it up here, right behind the neck, like that. Or you can just completely take it off the neck like this, so it's in the front. Or you can lock it all the way over the other side. Don't feel like you have to do anything in one particular way. But I would say this. Find ways of holding your instrument that are comfortable. I know when I was first learning and later on, the big thing was to sling your guitar way down around your knees. And you just look too cool. Yeah, it looks too cool, but it also means that you're bending your wrist like this to try and play anything. It locks you out of a lot of things you could play. What's better is to bring it up to where you're comfortable and where you can actually get some mobility. You can bring your fingers around, whatnot like that. So don't get so caught up in image that you lose your capabilities, that you stymie your ability to grow, expand, get better, whatnot. Aside from that, talk to somebody. If you're a beginning guitarist, talk to somebody about your instruments, because very often people will shop price. It's understandable. You're starting out, you don't want to blow a lot of money, and so you buy a cheap guitar. Well, the rule of thumb that you get what you pay for holds true with guitars as with anything else, but not always. Sometimes you get a decent instrument for little money, but you have to know what to watch for. Now, I'm going to mention a couple things here. They'll probably need some clarification. I'd say Google them, do some research. But one of them is called intonation. What it boils down to is this. If the bridge of your guitar, this thing here, is not set right or in the right place on the body, then when you play a chord down here towards the bottom of the neck, or what I call the top of the neck, but some people call the bottom, may be in tune there, but playing the same chord up here, hear that? It's a little off. This thing's intonation is not perfect. Sometimes it's just impossible to get them perfect on an instrument. But that's something to look at when you're shopping instruments. Try it out. Tune it up. You know, make sure it's really tuned well. Then try a chord down here. And try the same thing at the 12th fret. Any chord you play at the 1st fret, or the nut actually, you can play up here too and let the strings behind it ring. Just go up to the 12th because that's an octave higher. Okay. Also, check out the action, which is the distance of the strings above the frets. You don't want to have to be pressing things so far down that you're carving grooves into your fingers. But by the same token, you should be able to play every fret up the neck without the string hitting a fret above it and causing a buzz. Count the number of frets that they're on a guitar. You know, you may, if you're somebody who wants to be playing a lot of real high things, then you're going to need as many frets as you can get. This has 24. More common is 21. So there are some things that I can play on this guitar that I can't play on a different guitar with fewer frets because there's nothing to press against. I could do it with a steel or something like that, but there's no frets to press against. You want to make sure you have a solidly built instrument. There is nothing wrong with a neck that is screwed in as opposed to being glued on. There's nothing inherently good about either one of them. It all depends on how well the guitar has been built. Try it out. Take a look at it. Make sure the neck's straight. Make sure that it has adjustments. You know, is there a truss rod adjustment? Is there saddle adjustments for the bridge? If it doesn't have those, well, then you got an instrument that's what it is, and that's it. That's as far as it's going to go. It's better to have something you can tweak a little bit to adjust, because even changing the gauge or the thickness of your strings on a guitar, if you should decide you want to go lighter gauge or heavier gauge, lighter being more flexible, heavier having a lot more tone, just changing that gauge of string will change the intonation of your guitar. So those are just some things. Beyond that, noodle. I call it noodling, but it's just, you know, the more you do of that, the easier things will get. And there are scales to learn. Some people ascribe to the modes. I like using modes. Look it up on Google. There's a ton of information about them. Others just use major scales. Modes are, for the most part, major scales. Not all of them, but most of them. Get a scale book. Play them, you know. Yeah, it can be boring. Well, sorry. It's the way it works, you know. You put in time, you put in effort, it gets easier, and it gets more fun. The resources on the internet now are huge, and you can use things to figure anything in the world out. So, there you go. That's my advice. Take it for what it's worth. If you have any questions, get a hold of me.